That really it just, for us, especially being in Seattle, like we were really affected just because of all the businesses that were spending money. And I can remember, like I was down in California, actually putting up a tower crane for a customer, and my superintendent called me and said, "Hey, we got to pull off of," it was Immunex at the time, big job that we had. It was like half our workforce, and we have to be gone in a week, but people started shutting these jobs down, right? So
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest, he's a husband, a father, the CEO of Apex Steel, and a 2-time CrossFit Games Masters champion, Kevin Koester. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm very excited to have you in sunny San Diego. We are on the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm just very excited to officially connect with you. You have this incredible story that I've followed remotely via Instagram. I've chatted with our Invictus Masters coach and coordinator, Nicole all about you. You've done some really cool things in the space, man. So before we dive into your story and this amazing conversation, I just want to thank you for coming down here and spending some time with us, man.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm stoked.
Yeah, this is really cool, man. And not to mention, before I dive into your story as well, like, look at that beard. Now that we're officially on YouTube, guys,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Yesterday we launched episode 40 on Apple and Spotify. So if you get a chance, check us out there. That's audio only. We would really appreciate if you could rate, review, subscribe, share, and check out some of our content. There's been some really special conversations so far, and this next conversation with Kevin's right there in alignment with all of those.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Yes, it is, man. So, before I kind of get into CrossFit and everything, one of the things that really gravitated me towards you was just how much of a priority you've made the family and you've made being a father and a husband. And would you mind kind of chatting about that a little bit? And then we'll talk about some of the adventures that you and your kids have gone.
Yeah. I think it probably starts with, my parents and the way I grew up, and that was always super important. My dad was, one of the hardest workers ever, and he always made it a priority for us, whether he was traveling for business and he would take us with, and, Mom and my sister and I would hang out at the pool all day while he was working, and he'd come back and get crazy on the diving board,
Oh, that's cool.
So that was always, I just had a really good example from that. My wife, she was fortunate enough to have the same. So when we got together, it was like, we knew it was a lifelong commitment. We'll be 28 years this August.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah,
That's huge, right? Yeah. Like, especially you look at relationships throughout the world, there's peaks and valleys. You got to have the uncomfortable conversations. And, 2 kids 28 years later and 2 CrossFit Games championships, plus, running a couple businesses, one of which is Invictus Seattle.
Yeah. Excited to team up with Invictus last year. And we opened up in August of 2020, believe it or not, in the pandemic.
Yeah. Not necessarily ideal timing, but knowing you and knowing, how resilient you are in the midst of adversity. And, going back to your family background, it sounds like your dad prepared you very well.
Yeah, he did. He took the time. He was a teacher.
Okay.
And he loved to teach. And I don't mean as a profession, but just that was his thing. Like, he loved to teach, and he never told me no.
Oh, that's cool.
I can remember, we'd be on a family vacation driving down, and I'd say, I bet you I can run to the top of that mountain in 5 minutes. He'd pull over and let me try. 15 minutes later, I'd come back to the car dripping wet and only made it, a couple hundred yards up the mountain.
That's so cool.
And I could go on and on about the stories about him, but, he was always like, I'm going to let you learn on your own.
Yeah, that's great.
He wasn't afraid to let me fail.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How did that kind of foster and facilitate your relationship with failure? And then how did that also lead to your ability to teach, not just in fitness, but in business and as a father?
As far as the teaching thing, I think about it all the time. And my son is now 19. My daughter's 24 years old. And sometimes I catch myself, with the kids, and I'm having these learning moments or these teaching moments with them. But, so that definitely, I continued to follow in his footsteps, and teach the kids when I could.
I think I heard a funny story where you were teaching your son how to mow the lawn, and he was like all over the place, and every bit of you wanted to like step in and help and then like give direction, but you're like, no, he has to fail. He has to do it and figure it out on his own.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's such a great learning lesson. I mean, with this being, a mindset podcast, that relates to so many things, right? Like we can't just have the theoretical side where we're reading how to snatch in a book or we're watching it on YouTube. We have to physically practice.
Yeah.
And, in the pursuit of practice and striving to master a craft, we learn a lot about ourselves. We learn about how we learn. We learn, how to teach others, right? Because as we go through that journey, maybe there's somebody else that's at a different spot in their journey. Now we're teaching them, and to teach is to learn twice. And it's this whole domino effect of all tides rising.
Yeah.
It's a very cool thing within the CrossFit space in relation to teaching. That's very cool.
But I know I agree with you on how do you learn. And like for me, I always learn by watching. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for me to read something, comprehend it, and then go do it.
Yeah.
But if I could watch someone do it, that's how I learned.
With that being said, what was your upbringing kind of like? Where did you begin this whole world of being outdoorsy and adventuring and learning? And I think eventually you found your way into gymnastics as well.
Yeah. So I was born in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
My dad's whole family, and again, he was always a risk taker, and he was the first one of a large family to move out to the West Coast, and we moved to Oregon. Spent some time there, and that's when we really got into the outdoors, which was part of the reason he wanted to move out west, you know. So we used to camp all the time, right? Do fun things like that. And
I just want to take a moment to really appreciate camping,
yeah.
right? Like you get up when the sun is up, you go to bed, or you're hanging around the campfire making s'mores, enjoying the stars and one another and conversation. And I feel like modern day, it's like, we have all these lights. We're on the computers. We're on the phones. We need these blue light blockers. There's this constant element of distraction. And, in fatherhood and just in general, I think camping is so special because it allows for this. Absolutely. Eye contact and spending time with one another, growth, development, progression. And then during the day, you get the beaming of the sun. You get the elements. You get dirty.
Yeah.
You get to go out and adventure and hike and fish. And, sometimes it's just like, it's surrendering to what our bodies and minds really need versus like pushing to societal norms, which is this constant crave for comfort.
Yeah. And when I get home from a trip, like I am an avid backcountry archery hunter, we do brook fly fishing. And
oh, that's cool.
If I have time, that's where you'll find me, or that's where I want to be. Like I'm more comfortable sleeping in a tent for a week than I am at the Four Seasons. It just is how it is.
That's cool, man.
But yeah, we love to do a lot of backcountry stuff. And like you said, it's funny how your body adapts too, because we're on a routine at home. We get out in the woods and you're exactly right. It starts to get dark and you sit by the fire for a while. I find myself going to bed sometimes, especially if it's like a late fall hunt. We're doing something like that. We're in bed at 7 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And then, 5:30, 6 o'clock, sun's starting to come up. This is later in the season. You're there during the summer. Maybe you're up a little later, but you do. You go to bed when it's dark and you get up as soon as the light comes up.
That's very cool, man. How many times a year do you try to make time to get out there and adventure a little bit?
I'm probably a solid half dozen.
Okay.
It's not every weekend. I'm super busy, but we do some really cool adventures. My business partner out of Montana and I, in November, we raft in a trip. So we'll jump in a raft in November. It's usually about 10 degrees out.
Whoa.
And we raft in for about 3 hours, set up our tent, set up camp, and we're usually there for about 3 days, and then we raft out.
Wow.
It's an amazing trip, but, and that's something where it's about fighting the elements as well.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like, middle of the day, we'll be out, and this is all for backcountry archery hunting, and middle of the day, we'll make a fire and string our hammocks up in a tree and put a tarp over if it's snowing, and we just sit there and chill out and have a cup of coffee. Yeah,
That's
it's
cool,
amazing.
Man. That's very, very cool. What does that do for when you come back to this life of training for the CrossFit Games, running Apex Steel, being a husband, being a father, and, spinning all the plates that you're doing in day-to-day life? When you get away, how does that help you reset?
It does. That's exactly what it does. It's a reset, refocus, when I'm away, I don't think about anything. Like, I'm super type A, just everything I do in my life. And I laugh sometimes because I look at my schedule, my Outlook, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like everything within half-hour increments, right? Like, my day is packed usually from 6 to 9, 6 in the morning till 9 at night. So when I do that, it's the only way that I truly relax. Like, when I'm in the gym training, I don't think about anything else that's going on in my life. Sometimes it's very difficult to get in, like to step away from my office and go to the gym. Fortunately, it's only 200 yards up the street.
Nice.
But, once I'm there, I forget about things. The other way that I do that is get away for these, these long extended weekends, 4 or 5 days in the backcountry. And when I'm finished with that, I'm ready to get back to it, right? I'm excited about everything else that I have going on.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't look at them as a chore when I get back to it.
How do you find the ability to kind of compartmentalize your day? You mentioned when you get to the gym, you forget about everything else. Your sole focus is your mobility practice, your breath work, your movement practice, and then striving to, maximize your human potential for your competitive goals. How are you able to kind of let go of, maybe a challenging conversation, a tough email thread, a business deal that maybe didn't go well, maybe a financial challenge? How are you able to kind of put those in a locked door, at least for that 90 minutes to 2 hours to train, and then, know that you can go revisit it later?
Yeah, it takes a minute sometimes. Usually it's in that warm-up period where, it just kind of naturally goes away. Like I'm prepared to focus on my next event for the day. So trying to, get in the gym, and like you say, it's that first 15 minutes or so that sometimes, and you nailed it. It's that email thread, it's the phone call, it's whatever it is that takes all your attention for a minute. Get in there, start to warm up, and the next thing I know, I'm 100% focused on what I'm doing at that moment. And I try to, in life, like, I'm always thinking about what's next, right? Very rarely do I sit and reflect and go, wow, I did this, that's cool, or we just did this. Instead, and I actually have an issue with, and I'm trying to get better at it, where I'm trying to rush through things to get to the next event, whatever that is, right? So when I'm in the gym now, I try to get there, take a few minutes, and then focus on what I'm doing, right?
I really appreciate you sharing that. Just for those of you watching or listening, even high performers, right? They're not perfect. They find ways to, compartmentalize or juggle or, take a moment. Or sometimes they accept their shortcomings and then find ways to share them with others, talk through them, and then find ways to, optimize their practice or find better ways to manage those stresses. Because inevitably adversity is around the corner for all of us. Yeah. Especially as a business owner, I'm sure you're typically leaving a problem, and approaching a problem. And if you weren't, you probably wouldn't have a business.
Yeah, we try really hard to, get ahead of things and be proactive instead of reactive. That's the way I like to think about it that way.
I like that. And then, through it all, practicing that famous John Wooden quote, be quick, but don't hurry.
Yeah. For sure.
I saw a cool picture the other day. It was the past was over here and the future was over here. And then it had an arrow pointing right in the middle, and it said where the magic happens, right in the present moment. Because in theory, those things don't exist yet.
Yeah, well, I've talked about that with my kids too. Just getting ready to go away for a weekend camping with, my daughter and I started camping when she was 3 years old. Yeah. We spent most of that time playing Barbies in the tent, but hey, man, I was down to, and then we'd maybe get out and get in the boat and do a little fishing. But I would think about that. You run home from work and you're throwing everything in the truck, trying to get ready to go, and then you get away. knowing that you got to come back, 2 days later and unpack everything and get ready for work, you know. And that's where I would find myself rushing things in life. And so I just continue to try to get better with that. Like, okay, I'm here. I need to just enjoy this.
And I love that. There's so many transferable skills there, right? Like, you may have conversations with people where what they're talking about is not as important to you as it is to them. But as a business owner and the leader of the troops, you need to make sure that they feel heard. And, you're in the tent and, you'd rather be fishing or in the boat or shooting the bow or getting your feet wet somewhere. And your daughter's like, no, Daddy, I want to play with the Barbies.
Yeah.
And the fact that you surrendered to that is so fascinating to me, right? Like, I mean, you can relate that to CrossFit where there may be a movement that you're like, man, I really don't want to do this. But you know that it's inevitably going to come up when you least expect it on the field of play, and you want to be prepared for that. So you do this really eloquent procedure of putting in the time, even when you don't want to. And that's a correlation that I see with a lot of high performers. That's really, really cool, man.
Thank you.
I want to unpack that a little bit. You mentioned briefly your dad and, some of the teaching that he had a little bit in your upbringing. What was your schooling like, and when did you, inevitably find sport and athletics?
So as far as the sports and athletics, I remember, man, it must have been 76 or something like that, but I was watching the Olympics, and I was watching these gymnasts, and I thought, I was in second grade, and I thought, I want to be able to do that. That is so cool, the way these people control their bodies, right? And I was focused on that. So I told my parents, I said, hey, I want to start gymnastics. At the time, I think I was playing soccer or whatever, it's like most young kids do. And I got very involved in gymnastics. So to the point where I competed in the Youth Olympics.
Oh, cool.
Traveled quite a bit, and it was for my parents. This is when we were living in Portland, and we were over in Eugene at competitions every weekend. So got really involved in gymnastics, and I was 4 hours a day, 5 days a week,
Wow, that's a lot, man, especially as a young kid.
Oh, yeah.
How'd you fit school into that?
It was regular school. I got to be honest with you. I've never been a great student. That wasn't my thing,
Maybe not in the classroom, but outside, it sounds like you were a great student because of your ability to teach. And we always say to teach is to learn twice.
Yeah, thank you. Life in general, for sure. I've always prided myself on having good common sense. And honestly, if I think about it, and I am 100% for academics, right? Just for me, it wasn't my thing. But I always talk to my kids even. I'm like, hey, if you can have some good people skills, good work ethic, and some common sense, you're most likely going to be pretty successful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the people skills is huge.
For sure.
Everybody's coming in with a story we know absolutely nothing about. So just holding that space, approaching every conversation with compassion and empathy, and then understanding, do we need to push or do we need to pull?
Yeah.
Or do we just need to be in that space in that moment? And that's cool that you really recognize that at a young age. That's great emotional intelligence. You look at that, I think Harvard Business Review talks a lot about IQ versus EQ. And it sounds like your ability to practice EQ is what ultimately led to the development of Apex Steel.
I think so. I mean, I had, great relationships with the people that I worked with. And I remember, working for the first company that I started to move up the ranks in, as a superintendent, as a field foreman, superintendent. I actually started doing some estimating. And I was like, you know what? I want to do this, and I want to do it way better than the guy that I'm working for, right? And I can do this. I had no sense of business. I mean, I hadn't owned a business. I hadn't had any schooling. I started as an iron worker when I was 19 years old, right? So, but I knew I could do it better than this guy, and he was doing it well. I really enjoyed working for him, but I knew there was some things, and one of those things was the way he treated people. And I thought, and we're a union contractor, so we have some guidelines that we have to stick to. But I thought, why can't you treat people better than what the union tells you have to treat them, right? And not look at these employees as numbers, but look at them as people, right? And what makes them special, and how do you fit the right people in the right positions? And I think that's so important, right? So
it's great that you recognize that, right? Like, I mean, what's that famous analogy? You ask a fish to climb a tree, he's going to feel like a failure his whole life. You put a fish in water and they're going to be able to figure it out and, optimize their skills that they're blessed with.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you recognize that, this gentleman, despite the fact that he was successful in doing it well, you acknowledge that, but then also we're like, over here, hey, here's some loopholes that, or places that I think I could gap fill a business in the future, position people appropriately, treat people appropriately. And at the end of the day, if an employee feels valued and appreciated, they're going to perform better.
For sure.
That's cool that you recognize that. And so, after working with, this gentleman for a little while, how did you ultimately take that leap?
So, and I decided fairly young. Like I said, I started at Ironworkers at 19, had to get some experience, of course, and this time my wife and I got married. I think I was 26, and I said, I'm going to have a business by the time I'm 30. That was my goal. Like, by the time I'm 30 years old, I will own my own business. And so,
did you write it down, or was it just something that kind of
No, I
floated?
used to write all my goals down.
Okay.
And I still do that. Like, I'm big on business planning at the end of the year. I take a lot of time, usually the whole month of December.
Oh, cool.
And I take a lot of time and I think about all the different companies. Apex is split up into 4 different companies, whether that's from risk management or ownership, right? I've got some partners in some of the companies. But I always sat down and wrote out my goals. Again, one of those things my dad taught me early on, right?
That's
like
cool.
Every year he'd sit down and he'd say, I want you to write out your financial goals and your mental goals, right? And he was a godly man, so he'd have us write those goals out, So
that's cool. It becomes real at that point, right?
Yeah,
It's like
sure.
a tangible living organism at that point.
Yeah.
And you see it to the human eye versus an idea, which can get lost in translation when life or things get in the way.
You say it out loud and it becomes real.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to say, we've talked about the fact that I've been blessed to win the games twice, and make no doubt that I am going back to win again this year. All right. Like, that's all there is to it. Right. Like, I have a goal. I say it out loud and I'm like, okay. And I'm not going to make qualifications for it. Like, hey, I'm going to win the games, but I'm going to do the best I can or whatever. I mean,
yeah, you're going with a mission in mind.
Yep. One goal, period.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool, man. I love that. And so you mentioned Apex is split up into 4 companies. Do you have like a business coach or somebody that helped structure that? Or how did you ultimately get to the point of like business organization and understanding the financials and understanding payroll and understanding how to delegate, right? In the beginning, it's like you're seeing all these things. You probably want to do most of them on your own. How did you learn some of that business savvy aside from the fact that you were great with people and great with relationships?
It took a long time, to be honest. And it's one of the things I talked to my son about today. He's very much like me, very hands-on, but having an education will make things so much easier. I mean, for me, it was difficult to formulate emails.
Yeah.
Because I'd never written before.
Yeah.
It just wasn't my thing.
I mean, speaking and writing are so different.
Oh, yeah.
And, especially with phones now, like we're all so busy. That's like, oh yeah, let me get back to this email real quick. Yeah. And then you look back on your computer later, you're like, man, did I really write that? Like,
yeah. So, it took me a while, and I'm blessed with good people. My CFO, she was amazing. She was actually a girlfriend of one of the ironworkers that worked for me, and she was our first employee, and said, hey, we're looking for an administration gal, to work in the office. And Jill came to work for us at that time, part-time. She wanted to get her business degree. So I said, hey, I'll pay for your school. You go to school at night. And so she did.
That's a cool compromise.
Oh,
and you also knew that you were going to get the return on investment based on the knowledge that she was receiving.
Yeah. And she's amazing. So, and she was in her early 20s at the time. She would work from 6 to 2:30 every day because we're early. Our industry, we start early. And then after that, she would take off and go to night school. She got her degree. And it's crazy because today I work with my banker, the accountant, and they'll tell me, you understand that you have one of the best CFOs in Seattle. Like they're like, work with all different levels of businesses, and she's been amazing. She's been with me for 25 years now.
That's great.
Just having great people, right? Like that, and continuing to learn. And I wanted to know, again, Dad taught me a lot of things, and he was like, you need to have that table with all four legs, your accountant and your legal team and your bankers and your insurance and bonding agents for a construction company, right? And so my dad was in commercial insurance business. So he insured a lot of big contractors and stuff. So I think about that table, and I remember interviewing people going, I don't really know exactly what they're supposed to be doing, but I knew that I wanted good people that I trusted. And I had to learn as I went along. And we started small. It'll be our 25-year anniversary at Apex this year.
Wow,
we
congratulations,
started small.
man.
Thanks.
That's very
Yeah,
cool.
and been through some tough times. Like I was telling you, the dotcom bust, the recession, like we hit rock bottom a couple times.
Let's lean into that a little bit.
Yeah.
You've had great success. You've really sat back and studied, business a little bit and delegated and found people that are very, very responsive and really masters in theory at their craft. You got the four legs of the table. What happened with the dot-com bust in 2003 in relation to you and your business?
That really just, for us, especially being in Seattle, like we were really affected just because of all the businesses that were spending money. And I can remember, like I was down in California actually putting up a tower crane for a customer, and my superintendent called me and said, hey, we got to pull off of, it was Immunex at the time, big job that we had. And it was like half our workforce, and we have to be gone in a week, but people started shutting these jobs down, right? So it was really about the decrease in revenue immediately that was so hard to really just kind of adapt to.
Why was it called the dot-com bust? What was the relevance there?
Well, I think at the time, obviously, all the computer companies, and especially in Seattle, why I say it was, so challenging there. Silicon Valley, I know, was also hit, but that's why we were here, because that's who we were building for. We were building for Microsoft. We were building for all these companies.
Kind of when we started to see the onset of just the growth and development of tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that was challenging, not as challenging as the recession for us.
And that was in 2010, 2011.
For us, it was like in 2009, 10, or 8, 9, we still had a lot of residual work, but we were doing work for Nintendo, Microsoft, all these companies in town. And that work, we had a 60% decrease in revenue, like overnight. And I was so bullish, right? Going into 2010, I'm like, no way, I'm not cutting, we're going to make it through this. And then all of a sudden, 2010 was over, and it cost me a lot of money to stay in business that year. 2011 came, and the bank dumped us. They're like, yeah, not interested in construction companies. And so where am I getting money to make payroll? Like, we'd burned through a lot of cash in the last year. So I was forced to make changes at that point and say, okay, right now we have to make these changes today. And we did. And I remember we interviewed like 6 different banks, and I went to my banker and I said, okay. And of course they weren't going to give us any money at the time. I said, I'm going to put my money in your bank, and you're going to watch how we manage it, and you're going to want to give me money within a year, right? Because ultimately we needed the money, and we made it work. But man, we were down to pennies in the account because we had to cash flow everything ourselves, right? And from that point, I said, I will never rely on the bank again.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. When you look at that from a bird's eye view now, in hindsight, how were you able to manage being a father? Your kids were, not out of the house yet. They weren't adults, and you're managing these financial stresses. We briefly chatted before about how one of the things that you seek and find fulfillment in being a business owner is the growth and development of your employees. Well, now you're looking at these people potentially needing to let them go, potentially needing to make changes with regards to how you structure and organize your business. How did you sit with that? And what were some of those conversations with your wife? What was your outlet? Like, I mean, that's a heavy thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not, hey, just missed, you know, a clean and jerk. You know, this is a big deal. And you're sitting with this in 2010, 2011, where your kids are, you know, middle school age, I think.
Yep.
What did that kind of look and feel like?
So from a decision-making standpoint, you know, my wife and I have had an amazing relationship. She's a very, very intelligent lady. So we talk about everything, and we talk about a lot of those decisions. Was fortunate to get a lot of good feedback from her. So we made decisions together, right? Even though I was running the business on the day-to-day, she's always been in my court, you know. As far as the kids, it was kind of just the same thing we talked about earlier, getting in the gym today and being able to turn things off and go to the gym and forget about that email string that I just had, you know. I knew my responsibility to the kids, you know. So let's say I would get off work, and I can remember things like this. I'd pick my kid up and take them to soccer practice, and while they were on the field, I'd love to watch them. I would just run circles around, right? A lot of the other parents were just sitting there chilling out, chatting, whatever. And I would be able to watch my kids, focus on them. I'd get my exercise in. I mean, I'd run for an hour, and I would just think. Like, I do my best thinking on, you know, when I'm mowing my lawn with the straight lines, by the way.
Yeah. High and tight, baby.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, I love that. Like, I'll just zone out and mow my lawn for an hour, and I just do some of my best thinking. So the stuff like that, I'd take the kids and make them a priority, you know, and I didn't have to be 100% present with them, right? Because they were training. Yeah. But I still kept up on my responsibilities, like, and we'd have time to chat in the car, both directions, right?
That's great.
So yeah,
your ability to be present, I really admire that. That's a very challenging task for somebody, you know, in your shoes, or rather your boots.
Yeah.
Before you found CrossFit in 2015, what did exercise look for you? Obviously, your day-to-day job of being an iron worker, you know, climbing things and moving lumber and moving all kinds of heavy external objects. I mean, you were already a strong man. But what did exercise look like aside from, you know, running around the soccer field? You know, how did you develop that baseline of work capacity and mental fortitude?
You know, so it all started with gymnastics, you know, and that was for 4 or 5 years, had the ability to train with the University of Washington men's team. And I was in 8th grade at this point. My dad came and he's like, yeah, you're learning way more about life than you are gymnastics. Are you sure you want to keep up with this? And at the time, they didn't have a youth program in Washington when we moved. So that's when I started playing other sports. And so I loved playing football. And I wrestled and I ran track and pole vaulted. So that was really my base, right? Wrestling. It's one-on-one, right? Yeah. Like, you got to dig deep all the time. Yeah. All right. And I used to get so nervous, I would dry heave before my matches, you know. But wrestling, can't say enough about what that does, how that builds you. Track was kind of my fun event. I just happened to be really good at pole vaulting. Traveled around, you know, the Orient and all over the place on a junior national team. So I had this base of athletics. And then I decided to try school for a year, and all I did was lift and go to school. Figured out school wasn't for me, you know, but I lifted. And then I found the Ironworkers by the time I was 19. And to be honest, it's like doing CrossFit 10 hours a day. Yeah. Like, you know, my boy sent me a picture last night. Actually, one of the foremen sent it to me. Said, there's your boy, man. He's just absolutely killing it. And he's climbing a 35-foot column with flanges 4 inches thick and, you know, with 30 pounds of tools on him. I mean, you do that all day, you know, and that's what he said last night. He goes, that was one of the hardest climbs that I've made. He goes, but that's what I love about this, right? Like, he knew you're either going to, I mean, they're tied off, you know. But anyway, it was 10 hours a day of physical fitness. And when I first started CrossFit, people asked, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
I'm like, I've been doing iron work for the last 20 years, you
Yeah.
know? And don't get me wrong, if there was easy days, I would always go to the gym,
Yeah.
you know? And then as I started to, like, CrossFit became a thing, I didn't really know what it was, but I remember, like, emulating things. I'd be in the gym and I'm like, I think I can do that. And, you know, I start messing around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's so cool that you had such a broad spectrum, right? You look at wrestling. Ricky Moore, one of the athletes here at Invictus and one of our coaches, was a wrestler, and we've had him on the show. Josh Bridges, was a big time wrestler, and I'm sure there's a few others. But being able to do track and pole vault and, you know, football and soccer, and obviously, you know, the body awareness component associated with gymnastics is very cool. So you had this great baseline foundational physical principle, and then you add that on with the mental and the physical associated with being an iron worker. Like, you have a pretty cool recipe for success.
Yeah, it worked out all right.
That's cool. What does your training kind of look like now? So you're following the Invictus Masters program led by Nicole DeHart.
Yeah, the best.
She's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, she
is. Ironically, I actually didn't even think about this. This is her, Nicole DeHart, on the cover of our Invictus Mindset book. That's very cool.
Yeah, she's super cool.
What is it about her that enabled you to kind of connect with her? And then, you know, what does your training look like, and how's it structured now?
Well, it's kind of funny because, you know, I had won the games in 2017, and to be honest, I was so new to CrossFit. I mean, I started at the end of 15, and when I did that, it was just on athleticism and just determination, right? Like, I wasn't a great CrossFitter. In 19, when I decided to do it, and the reason that I decided to do it in 19 was because I felt like I had this ability to inspire people that I was kind of wasting in 18. I'm like, okay, been there, done that. You know, my goal was to go to the CrossFit Games at 50. When I came out of the qualifiers in first position, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to win, right? So I reset my priorities and my goal. I did that, and so in 18, I'm like, done that. No need to do it again. When I started in 19, I had actually come down to San Diego. My daughter was going to school down here and came to Invictus. I'm like, wow, what a cool place. And I learned more in one session down here, working with Nick on deadlifts. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. So I decided to follow the online program, and I actually started like the first day of the cycle in August, right after the 18 games. And I said, I need to become a better CrossFitter to do this again. And, you know, and that's where I met Nicole, reached out to her. And I think she thought I was crazy because she had no idea who I was. And she said, what's your goals? And I said, to win the CrossFit Games. And I think she was like, yeah, funny. So, and then.
Isn't it funny how things come full circle, though? Like, you mentioned, I'm not really into school. That's not really for me.
Yeah.
And then you came into Invictus after, you know, connecting with your daughter at a local college in San Diego State. And it was the learning that got you hooked.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe it's a great insight. You know, hopefully this can be a platform to help share this with the world, that, like, maybe the classroom isn't the only way to teach. Maybe there's this interactive style, or maybe, you know, sometimes classroom, sometimes Zoom, sometimes interactive. I mean, I don't know exactly what the recipe is there, but it's interesting because, you know, you have this whole resume of success. You've won the CrossFit Games twice, which is, you know, if that was the only thing on your resume, still super impressive. You are the owner of Invictus Seattle. You are 50 what now?
54.
54, and look at you. Like, you practice your mobility, you make that a priority. I know you mentioned you're doing ROMWAD.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a big thing. And it's like, maybe school isn't you know, or the way school is structured doesn't need to be the only way.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's very cool that you took the time to come in and learn. I mean, you could have very easily been like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a CrossFit Games champion, right? But you didn't do that. You surrendered to the process of learning, which I think is very, very cool. I'm very fascinated with your journey. What does, you know, so you started working with Nicole. What does your actual training look like? Like, is there a kind of a sequential structure that you follow? Obviously, the templates change based on the season a little bit, but, you know, is there some sort of insight that you could give as to the secrets of Kevin Koester?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any secrets. obviously hard work, right? Like, I mean, and max effort every day, whether I want to or not. To be completely honest, I follow Nicole's programming pretty much to the T. I know I've talked with her a little bit about, hey, there's some things maybe like gymnastics are in my wheelhouse, right? Heavy lifting at my body size, right? It's the more challenging things for me, right? So there's things like that maybe I'll go, okay, I'm going to focus. I'm going to make this more about a strength workout because I know that's what I need. So I'll adjust some things like that occasionally. But for the most part, I follow it. Right now, of course, you know, she's done the games programming for us. And we're at 2-a-days, a few days a week. So usually I'm on Monday, Tuesdays, long sessions in the afternoons. Wednesdays I usually do a track day in the morning on Wednesday mornings.
Does she structure that as well?
She does, yeah.
Cool.
And it may be a Tuesday optional workout, but we do it on Wednesday mornings. And then we add in some strongman stuff, whatever. So we usually combine like a couple things on Wednesday morning and then do a training in the afternoons. Thursdays, I swim every Thursday. And I was always super comfortable in the water, but I sucked at swimming, right? So that's something that I've really had to learn. And we had to swim in the 17 games. When I went to Wadapalooza last year in 2020, I knew we were going to swim. So I had a mission to become a swimmer. So
that's cool.
I try to swim every Thursday and just continue to get better at it.
I love that. Do you have training partners or do you train solo?
Right now, I'm so fortunate because I have two of the most killer training partners. So
that's cool.
Sherry Ann, she just made the games, same age group, 50 to 54.
Cool.
And she's very similar to myself. She was a gymnast, smaller, and she's awesome. Like,
I'll have to have her on the show and pick her brain a little bit.
Yeah, she's the best. And then my buddy Pat Sprague, he's in the 55s, and he is a bear. This guy is so strong. It's off the hook. So he's an awesome, and he made the games this year. So we have 3 of us from Invictus Seattle that will be representing
That's great.
this
Congratulations, man. That's very cool.
So it's really fun to have people with different strengths. Like Pat's maybe not the best gymnast, but he's getting better every day, right? And I'm getting stronger every day because I chase him. I'm always like, you're not getting more than 20 or 30 pounds ahead of me, man. I just got to stay with you.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate? You mentioned, you may turn certain workouts into like a strength piece for you because that's what you need to work on. How do you structure the psychological differentiation between training versus competing? Obviously, it's a little bit easier when you have personalized programming or you have training partners that are only 3 people. But one of the things that we see a lot, especially in our competition class, is like, hey, what was your time, Kev? Right? Everybody's competing to be first on the whiteboard versus, how can I structure this to work on some of my deficiencies? And then other days, obviously you want to get a win, right? Maybe you had a tough day at work or school or whatever, and you need to get a win when you're inside the gym. How do you kind of separate that and have that honest conversation with yourself?
To be honest, I've never cared what anybody thought about me. I mean, that's just all the way around, right?
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunately, people become jealous of one thing or another in life. It's something that I've learned, right? And you can't take that. I need to know what I want to do and do it, right? And who I want to be, and I want to be this diverse person, I want to be able to dress up and go out with my wife, and I want to go live in a tent, and I'm okay with that, right?
We want both.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think about that when I train is I really don't care sometimes about the time. I am trying to create the best version of myself that I can be in there. So if I know what the stimulus is for me, that's what I'll work on. Also, Justin, my partner at Invictus Seattle, and he spends a lot of time coaching us, and he knows me inside out as an athlete. So we'll talk about it,
That's
before
cool.
and say, hey, I think you should do this. Like chest to bar, you need to do, 1.5 times what's programmed, to create the stimulus, to get my heart rate up like it would other people doing 6, I'm doing 12, whatever it is, So yeah, I think just understanding what it is every day that I'm trying to get out of the workout is huge.
That's very cool, man.
Yeah.
I love that you separate that and realize the maturity that kind of takes. Do you kind of pull in, your son or your daughter into CrossFit, or what's the relationship between you and your kids and the sport of CrossFit?
My daughter, not so much.
Okay.
Obviously I've tried to introduce her to everything that I do in life, and she loves the outdoors and to hike and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
She was never interested in CrossFit, and it's a shame because she would have been a beast.
Yeah.
She was an amazing soccer player, and she's a great athlete, but just not her thing,
Mm-hmm.
which was okay. My son, on the other hand, he's been training with me since he was probably 14.
Oh, that's cool.
And today it's probably 1 out of 5 workouts I can beat him at.
Mm-hmm.
He's stronger than I am. He's a great gymnast. But we have a lot of fun working out together.
That's cool. How do you accept that? Right, where it's like now your son's kicking your ass a little bit.
In everything. That's the thing, right? Like we're avid snowboarders,
Mm-hmm.
Mountain bikers, And I remember we were on vacation here a few years back, and we went out for a run, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy runs like a gazelle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't keep up with him anymore. I came back and told my wife, I can't keep up with Dom anymore.
Yeah.
So he started out running me first, and then slowly he started to outlift me with his squats, stuff like that. And then we were mountain biking. I'm like, why is he pulling away from me? Like I'm letting go.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with snowboarding now. That was kind of the last thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I love it. It's the natural evolution, right? I've had a great life. I intend to have the rest of my life be just as good, right? But I'm accepting it. I'm accepting the fact that I'm going to be 55 in a couple months, right? And I'm okay with that and enjoying this part of my life. I'm actually stoked to be a grandfather.
That's
Neither
cool.
of my kids are ready to have kids,
Yeah.
but I'm stoked to be a grandfather.
That's
right?
very cool.
And
I think that concept of accepting who you are in every chapter of your life is very special and important. Some people don't want to relinquish who they were in order to move on to the next phase, and that's cool that you're accepting it. I also think it is so rad that you guys mountain bike and run and snowboard, and you're iron workers and businessmen and campers, and you shoot bows and you hunt. Like, what is it that you don't do, man?
Yeah. Well, I need to read more.
Okay.
I definitely need to read more.
You got audiobooks now for the drives.
I know. And I do that. I've got an office in Billings, Montana, so I spend a lot of time on the road going back. I fly a lot, but if I'm going to go over there and play, like when I go to Montana, I usually try to play. Either my mountain bike's in the back or my snowboard, my fly fishing rod, my bow. We're going to play over there. It's paradise for me.
That's cool.
But yeah, I need to start. Well, actually, I don't need to start. I have started reading more.
That's cool.
Right? So, and actually CJ, talking to him one day, CJ's an avid reader.
Yeah, he is.
Right? One of the most intelligent men I've ever met.
Yeah.
It's been a great relationship. But, so that's one of the goals for sure.
That's very cool.
Right.
How do you relinquish the gym environment when you go on these adventures? Like for me personally, I like bringing a sandbag or some dumbbells or some kettlebells so I could sneak in, just a small little workout. So that enables me to then be present on whether it's play or, next week we're going to semifinals.
Yeah.
What does that, kind of role look like for you, and how do you flip that switch?
So it's funny because I was elk hunting in Oregon a few years ago, and there was this draw that we would hunt every day, right? So I'd hike down there at 5:00 in the morning, when it was time to come out midday, it was probably 1,000-foot elevation gain. And literally every day I would time myself. So
Wow.
I was out hunting,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, okay, how fast can I make it to the top? I was hunting for 7 days. By the end of the week, I had shaved like 10 minutes off my time, right? And my buddy's like, you're a fool, man. Right? Like they're all trying to conserve energy, and I'm like, I'll see you guys back at camp. I take my shirt off and, with my backpack on. So I'm always doing stuff like that. We hike through the Beartooths, and we'll go as fast as we can up to the top. Dom and I will drop our backpacks, and then we'll go run a few miles. We'll run up to the top, right to the waterfall, and back down. So
that's cool. Do you guys jump in and stuff when you get there?
Absolutely. Always looking for that adventure,
Great.
Pull-ups in the trees, just like you. Always trying to find something, to keep the fitness up, right?
That's cool.
Usually when I hunt, I do a couple hundred push-ups every day because I know I'm hiking all day, and I'm like, all right.
Do you do it out of fun, fear, knowing that it's just part of your personality, or like what's the intention associated with that?
Maybe a little bit of all of it.
Okay.
Right. Like it's always fun. I love doing stuff out in the outdoors. Right. Yep. So that's really fun. The fear part of it is I don't want to get out of shape.
Of course.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I just need to keep my fitness.
You didn't come this far just to come this far. You're going with a mission to win the games.
For instance, 2 weeks ago, I haven't been on the iron in years, in probably 3 years. Today my role is more about business development and sales and relationships, right? And I had the opportunity. We built this chair barn on the top of Big Sky Mountain in Big Sky, Montana here a few weeks ago, 9,200 foot elevation. I had the opportunity to go over there and work in the field and connect with my boy. And again, it'd been a few years since I've been on the iron. And I tell you what was so cool was that all of the work that I've put into mobility, because the last time I did it, I actually did another lift station in Big Sky on Ram Charger, and that was in 2018 between the games. 3 years later, I'm back there doing another one of these. And my athleticism and my mobility were twice as good as they were in 18. Wow. Just from the focus, the different things that I focus on today. One of my goals ultimately is to help people with that. Like as we age, how do you keep your athleticism, right? Number one, you have to be mobile. Yeah. So many of my buddies can't even get their arms overhead in their mid 50s, right? Yeah. So mobility, huge. Athleticism, right? Like practicing that stuff all the time, along with the very linear CrossFit type workouts. Yeah. Right. So if you
don't use it, you lose it.
That's right.
Right. And I think you're recognizing that, like, okay, as people get older, they typically tend to adventure less. Yeah. They tend to, be a little bit more reserved. They play significantly less, and, maybe your speed or your recovery isn't the same as it once was. And maybe you have a little bit more joint stiffness. So maybe it's a little bit less of something that you used to do a little bit more of, and a little bit more mobility and intention. And that's just absolutely amazing, that the fact that you're able to still do these things at 54, man.
Yeah, no, I love it. And my goal is to continue doing them. Like, I would love to really refine this after the games this year. My focus is really going to be on that. Like, how do I become the best version of a 55 to 60-year-old and be able to do the things? I want to be the 60-year-old that hucks backflips on my snowboard still. Yeah, right.
That's cool, man.
Yeah,
that's really cool. How do you structure food, like when you're traveling? What does that kind of look like? Obviously, when you're hunting, you come back with a good prize catch more often than not. We see Joe Rogan's page all the time with fresh elk and all those cool things. But how do you structure? Is it beef jerky? Is it Mountain House meals, which obviously aren't good for you, but taste awesome when you're out there?
They do the trick. Yeah. When I'm in the backcountry, I always usually lose some weight. Yeah. But I've got it down to a science, like a literal science, right? With exactly what I'm going to eat with my oatmeal in the morning. I usually have like a peanut butter and honey sandwich, like that I'll pre-make them and don't care how smush. I think
the smush ones are better, right? Because then the honey seeps into the bread, man. That's money.
Talking about. So if I'm 4 days, I'll make 4 sandwiches, right? And I'll pack 4 protein bars and jerky, right? And I usually, have all of our own protein, right? Like I eat elk burger probably 5 days a week. That's my go-to. So on Sundays, I'll usually barbecue up a dozen elk burger. And then I just, take those as my breakfast in the morning.
Nice.
But yeah, so just like that. And then I know exactly what I'm doing. Unfortunately, a lot of times we do the mountain homes at night because, they're lightweight and they get you some nutrition. But yeah, so when I'm in the backcountry, something like that at home, I'm pretty good about my diet.
Nice.
I'm not a guy that gains a lot of weight. I've got a really good metabolism, so I can eat and I eat.
Yeah.
I like to eat.
Yeah.
and I like good flavor too.
Yeah, for sure.
Know?
Very cool. Do you measure macros or anything like that? No.
No, I eat until I'm full pretty much.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, with how active you are, you probably need that.
Yeah.
What does your kind of supplementation look like? Do you take any sort of supplements? You mentioned maybe some protein shakes.
Yeah. Like I always start my day with some collagen in my coffee. I do collagen in the coffee, a probiotic and fish oil.
Okay.
That's kind of the first thing I do is drink like 20 ounces of water with some vitamin D drops.
Okay.
So I'll start out with that, have that probiotics and my fish oil, and then my collagen in the coffee.
Nice.
I'm usually, and technically that's not fasting because there's some calories in those things, but then I usually don't eat until around 10.
Okay.
And then I always try to do like maybe it's my elk burger with avocado on top of it and oatmeal. That's kind of my go-to if I had to say. Some hard-boiled eggs sometimes. And then lunch, I try to do good lunches. The challenge is depending on what time I'm going to the gym.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Can you get enough food in before you go?
Okay.
And then I eat pretty big dinners. You know, I'm a seconds kind of guy.
Yeah, you and me both, man.
Yeah.
You and me both. I dig it. What's your sleep situation look like with how busy you are? Obviously priding yourself on, being present in all those different crafts and trying to hold yourself to a high standard. Do you have like a pre-sleep routine, or how do you kind of wind down?
Again, one of those things that I could be better at.
Okay.
I continue to try to get better at it. The one thing that I've noticed, like I don't eat after 8 p.m. I'm usually trying to be asleep by 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So I'm religious about the hours, which kind of get your body set, like this morning I'm down here. I could have slept an extra hour, but my body doesn't let me, ding, wakes up and I'm like, it's time to go.
That's cool.
So, but
it's excitement for life, man.
Yeah.
I mean, dogs are like that. You look at them and they're just ready to go.
Exactly.
That's cool.
So I think for sure not eating, if I find if I eat, after 8 o'clock, sometimes I have a tough time falling asleep, and sugar definitely affects me. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't eat a lot of sugar, but I'm one of those guys that, if I dive in, I'm going big.
Yeah.
Right.
As you should, right? Like if
Yeah.
you hold yourself to a standard, you're pretty accountable, 90 to
sure.
95% of the time. Like indulge,
Yeah.
enjoy, build that memory. And then, you just get back on the discipline horse later.
For sure. But yeah, that sugar will kill me. Like
Yeah.
I'll wake up at midnight soaking wet, sweating. Yeah. So I try to stay away from the sugar and try not to eat too late.
It sounds like a pretty well-balanced approach, right? And it's not necessarily like super regimented where you document everything or use an app, but it's very intuitive. It's based around this relatively organic circadian rhythm that you get to experience when you're out in the mountains, kind of doing the things that you enjoy. I think your family dynamic is amazing, and how much effort and presence you place within the household and being a dad. You get a little smirk on your face when I mention that, which is
That's
cool.
Good stuff, man.
Lastly, how does your wife fit into all this? Like, you are a hard charger go-getter. Does she tag along on the adventures? What does that look like for you?
It's funny because we're so similar in a lot of ways. Like, we love to putz around and work in the yard on a Sunday afternoon or whatever, right? Like, we love taking care of things and just being together. Like, some of our best times are out working in the garden.
That's cool.
So she loves to do that kind of stuff, but we have these things, and the kids, our priorities in life are very similar. Like the big things, the family, the household, business, doing things right in life, putting the investment in, the other side of that is she would love to sit at the pool and read a book, where I want to go out on a bike ride or something like that. Yeah. And we've just learned how to do that. You know what I mean? We'll spend a couple hours and then I'm off to do my thing, and okay, I'll see you in a couple hours. Right?
And from what I've seen, those are like the best relationships, the ones where you come together, but then you unapologetically allow each party to just be themselves and go do the things that, you know, fill their cup and provide them joy.
Yep. Yeah. So that's I think that's it for us, right? Is understanding what we both need. And she, like I said, she's been my number one supporter for so long. So
that's great, man.
Yeah, it's been really cool.
Well, I've just had such a blast with my childlike curiosity, you know, picking apart your story and listening to you. And, you know, I really appreciate you coming down to spend some time with us. And hard charging straight into those 2021 CrossFit Games, man.
Yeah, we're stoked. I'm ready to go. Like, my goal is to be fitter than I've been. You know, I'll be 6 weeks from aging up, so I'll be pretty sure be absolutely the oldest guy in my age group, so, which I think would be really cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that was my goal this year. Like,
that is cool.
Let's do this, as in no excuses.
That's great, man. So, you're clearly doing it right. You're dialing it in on all cylinders. If you could leave a piece of advice for the world, what would you like to share?
You know, probably the thing that I need the most work at, and that is being in the moment. We talked about that, right? Mm-hmm. Like being in the moment. Sometimes we get busy and we're ready to rush on to the next thing. So, before you know it, you're here, right? Like, I have no idea where the last 20 years went.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, whew, I better slow down. How do I slow this down? 'Cause I'm not ready to leave this place.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There you go, guys.
Be in the moment, man, for sure.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. I really appreciate you. I am a fan.
Thank you.
I am really hoping that I get that phone call to tag along on one of these adventures.
All right.
Because I know absolutely nothing about most of the things that you do outside of the gym, man.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Kevin, where can people find you?
Really just Instagram. You know, I'm a pretty private person, honestly.
Good.
You know, but I've got an Instagram account. I think it's Kevin J. Koester.
Cool. And that's Koester.
That's right. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, man. I will absolutely follow your story, and I'll stay connected with you via Nicole as well.
Cool.
Guys, if you liked my conversation with Kevin, please rate, review, subscribe. Hit that little subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. We are so thankful to share our amazing project with you on a video platform now, so please enjoy. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.